Ghosts at the Old Library. Plum Porter, written and read by Richard V. Hirst.
Travis was a builder, but he never built a thing. The opposite, if anything, he tells you, with a small smile. Removal, taking away, creating more nothing. That was my speciality, if you can call it a speciality. You were a digger, right? You say. You've been meeting up with Travis for a couple of months now, and you've heard it before, this formulation. A builder who does the opposite of building. But you speak as though you're guessing the answer to a riddle. He nods. Foundations, bore holes, plate load pits. If a new building was going up, I'd be there first on site, down in the dirt. Ordinarily you meet for a drink in the Bluebell, but this evening you're sitting in Travis's flat when he tells you this. You took him to Tesco earlier in the afternoon, walked him back and put away his shopping. You're both now having a beer and watching television, although neither of you are paying attention, the programme quietly filling the gaps in the conversation. It's the first time Travis has invited you back here, and the place is old-fashioned, patterned carpets and chintz curtains. He looks older in the glare of his brightly lit front room than the dim confines of the pub. The lines of his skin deeper, his eyes roomier, his slowness and occasional shakiness more pronounced. How deep do foundations need to be, you ask? Well, it depends, Travis tells you, on how big the building is, what it's made of, the soil itself, and what's beneath it. Did you ever work on any famous buildings, you ask him, anywhere I might have heard of? And this is how Travis comes to tell you about Jessup. Jessup House, Jessup Court, he says. Something like that. We just called it Jessup. You won't have heard of it, though. It's just a block of flats somewhere in South Manchester. It's what it was built on, though, that caused such a fuss. A Victorian library building had been knocked down, Travis tells you. The rubble had been cleared away, and Travis had done the usual ground tests for the foundations, and his team arrived with a pair of mechanical diggers and a dump truck to commence their work. However, it wasn't long before one of Travis's workers spotted a digger scoop up some unusual shaped objects, which turned out to be bones. A forensic specialist was called in to inspect the site, who confirmed they were human remains, centuries old, and as they appeared to come not from an individual, but from a number of people, it was possible more remains would be discovered. She recommended that the digging be permitted to resume, but by hand, in order to avoid damaging them. But who were they, you ask? Were they murder victims? Was it an old graveyard? Travis shakes his head. No one seems to know for sure. They were so old. Probably a plague pit or a village massacre. The site was divided into 12 pits, each covered with a large gazebo, with two of the men working in each of the pits with spades and some specialist tools. Nobody seriously expected to find any further remains, so the atmosphere, on site, initially, was cheery. It was early December, and with no set deadline for the work to be completed, the men were in Christmas mode. They chatted, their radios playing, strips of tinsel and baubles hanging from their gazebos. But a few days later, a pair of thigh bones were found in Pit 7 in the morning. Followed that afternoon by a fragment of skull in Pit 10, some further bones in Pit 5, shortly before clocking off time. The next morning, there was the simultaneous discovery of a jawbone in Pit 9, and what appeared to be a hand in Pit 4. All of this took its toll on the mood. The radios were left off, the chatting dwindled, the tinsel was slowly stripped away by the weather. Travis's pit was Pit 1, and he shared it with a man called Mop, a nickname Travis assumed was an ironic reference to his baldness. Despite the atmosphere on site, Mop was simply desperate to find some body parts. "Oh, bloody Nora," Mop said, as they clambered down their stepladder after a pelvis had been unearthed elsewhere and carefully bagged up by the forensic specialist. "Are we the only pit now?" "I'm not sure," Travis sighed. "Well, could we at least put the radio back on?" "I don't think so, Mop. It doesn't seem very respectful." He handed Mop a spade and they both resumed their digging. "Bloody Christmas time," Mop muttered. "I need something to take this horrible job off my mind. If we're not going to find anything, I don't see why we should have to..." Mop's words were cut off as he struck his spade into the soil, hitting something with a hard thunk. Travis froze, staring. "What's that?" he said. "Oh, bloody hell," Mop whispered, his eyes shining in the gloom. "Hey, do you think we've got one, Travis?" Travis stepped over and poked at the ground with his spade. It didn't feel like bones, or at least he didn't think so. There was a hollowness, something large and solid, and he thought wooden. A root, perhaps? He scraped at the soil, unearthing what looked to be a length of wood. They resumed moving away the dirt, revealing not one length of wood, but several, all bound together with strips of rusted metal. "It's a chest," Mop panted, and then, in a more hushed tone, "A coffin." Travis gave it a tap with the heel of his boot. "It's not a chest," he told Mop. "It's a door." He went over to their toolbox, returned with a brush, and began sweeping the crumbs of dirt away until the outline of the door was uncovered. He then wedged his spade into the crack and began prising it open, crumbs of earth shaking free. It was not a large door. With effort, it collapsed open, splitting the decayed hinges, and they had peered into the darkness. Combined, their torches could just about illuminate the floor, but even that was murky, its distance and composition hard to determine. "Well," you say, "did you go down?" Travis falls silent. He's gazing out the window, his hand shaking at the armrest. "I'd best be making my tea," he says eventually. And his eyes connect with yours, and you see an emotion there, one you can't quite read, something between animosity and sadness. "You'll be wanting to be off." It's a week later when you're again in Travis's flat. The television is on, but the sound is down so low you can barely hear it, and the main light in his front room is no longer on. Instead, he has a pair of lamps, one by the sofa where you're sitting, the other by his armchair. You can't help but notice that Travis looks somehow lesser than he had the previous week. Thinner, more haggard. His shaking hands now unignorable. But he relaxes as he drinks from his glass. And for a while, Travis talks about the ales he likes, stouts and porters, dark and strong. Staring out at the street below in the gaps in your conversation. It isn't long before you get him to resume his story about Jessup. "That hole," you say. "Did you go down it?" He did. He wasn't sure why. He wouldn't say as though something called to him, not quite that, but he felt an impulse, a longing to descend. Holding onto the side of the frame, Travis lowered himself into the space. He dropped inside, his feet connecting with the floor further down than he'd expected, and he tumbled over. "Oh, you all right, Travis?" Mop called down. "Yeah, I'm fine," Travis called back. "You stay up there, though. I'll need someone to help me back up." Without a torch, the darkness would have been total. Even with one, it was close. Turning a slow circle while directing his light, all Travis could see was that he was in a large black space. The beam didn't seem to touch the perimeter. He shone upwards, picking out the thick lengths of wood which formed the roof, fractured and crusted with centuries of pressed-through soil as Mop called from the surface. "Well, what can you see, Travis?" "I think it must be a crypt," Travis said, venturing a few steps in one direction. "A crypt?" Mop said. "Yeah, a room for coffins," said Travis. "Yeah, I know what a bloody crypt is," said Mop. "Are there coffins in there? Are there bodies?" Travis didn't respond. He'd reached a rough wall that he was examining, dispelling its mystery with light. The details of its brickwork were lost beneath a layer of soil. Then, for a few seconds, he didn't move. Slowly he aimed his torch downwards. "Well, I don't think there are any bodies," he said to Mop, and then stamped his feet. A jigging staccato, each hollow thud lifting the soil, revealing it to only be a layer of soil on top of further floorboards. "Well, they might be beneath me." It took Travis a while to find the next door, methodically scraping through the layer of soil with his boots, until a thick vertical divide emerged among the horizontal gaps of the wooden boards beneath him. This one appeared to be in better condition than the door above, and as he cleared away the dirt, an iron ring was revealed. He pulled it upwards, the door falling open almost smoothly with an echoing slam. Again, Travis leant into the opening and shone his torch into the darkness below. This time the space was even darker, his torch not picking out a single visible detail. He swung his legs into the mouth of the entrance, lowered himself in, and let himself drop. "I shouldn't be keeping you," Travis says. You say something about it not being a problem, but, well, he doesn't seem to hear. He's looking out the window, a finger tapping rhythmlessly on the empty glass in one hand, the other hand shakily gripping and ungripping the arm of the chair. Travis's window looks out onto the street, just off the main road. Christmas is now only a couple of weeks away, and this evening the place is brightly lit and bustling, its festive glow illuminating Travis's face, serious, pitted, and slowly shaking from side to side. The next time you meet Travis is Christmas Eve, and you wait for him awkwardly outside Tesco for almost an hour, watching people come and go, their trolleys loaded with last-minute supplies. Then you make your way to Travis's flat, shouldering along the high street, the jolliness of the crowds, on the way to the pubs, crowding the shops, going home for Christmas, all at odds with your rising worry. Outside the block of flats, you look up, and you see Travis's window is in darkness, and something inside you tightens. Yet the entrance door unlatches when you press the buzzer, and the door to his flat opens when you knock. Still, it's hard to believe how drained Travis now looks. You've brought him a small bag of shopping as a Christmas gift. Nice bread, nice cheese, expensive biscuits, half a dozen bottles of Plum porter, which you carry through to the kitchen as he slumps in his armchair, wheezing, again looking out of the window at the street below. You pour him a beer, and one for yourself. You bring them through and take your place on the sofa. You talk for a while, of Christmas, of your own family, of their plans for tomorrow, their traditions, and then there's a lull in your conversation, and abruptly Travis says, "The space was bigger." "What's that?" you ask. "Space below. It was bigger. It was vast. It took me so long to cross it, but I heard a voice which I followed." "A voice," you say. "Well, that's not possible, surely. Was it one of the other builders? Had they found another entrance? Was it a prank?" "Don't let me keep you." Travis leans forward now, his black beer slopping onto his knees, peering at you. "You get home. It's Christmas, isn't it?" "But I've only just got here," you say. He sits back, sighs, nods, sighs again, drinks, and eventually he speaks. "It took me so long to cross it. Emptiness, darkness. It was the journey of a lifetime." You say something like, "Did you find anything?" But again, Travis seems to have drifted, gazing out the window. He rubs his hands together as though cold, and then shakily stands. "I found someone," he says. "Can you believe that? I found someone. They'd come to me. I called, and they came." He crosses over to the kitchen, reaches an arm inside, turns out the light, and then pulls the door shut. "After so long," he says, shaking his head, staring, "someone simply standing there. A man. Incredible. He was dressed in bright clothes and even had a light in his hand." He moves across the living room, turning off the lamp next to you, and then the one by his armchair. He stands there, looking down at the street. Outside, car lights brush past. Voices hoot. Christmas music comes and goes. "So long, you see," he says. "So long I'd been down there, just waiting. Waiting." He whisks the curtain shut. You say his name twice, reflexively first, and then there's a question, there's a warning. While the room is in darkness, there's still enough light for you to see Travis moving through the gloom at a terrific speed, and almost immediately he's over you, his closeness shocking the intimacy of it. Amid the brief struggle that follows, you find your gaze becomes fixed on the glass Travis has knocked over, the final dregs of beer seeping into his carpet, a dark stain blotting out the pattern as it blooms through the fibres.
Plum Porter was written and read by Richard V. Hirst with music by Oscilloscope. Ghosts at the Old Library is produced by Levenshulme Old Library in collaboration with All FM with support from Arts Council England.